Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Cool. So today we thought we'd break everyone kind of apart and talk about some guy and girl issues a little bit. For about half an hour, Ethan and I we're going to talk about authentic Catholic masculinity and some relationships, being a father, being a husband, and what that means. Please don't think that anything I'm about to tell you is because I think I'm an expert or that I'm somehow some manly dude or whatever. Most of my knowledge and wisdom comes from having screwed it up some point in the past. So please just keep that in mind. So some of this that we're about to say might be applicable to you and some of it may not, but let's just see how it goes. So obviously we live in a crazy time, right? Things are going nuts. It seems like everything's falling apart. We got riots, we have disease, we have pretty much a secular society. Father Lundberg sometimes talks about a post-Christian society, and in a lot of ways that's very true. And men, for the most part, you look in the media, how they're portrayed in sitcoms or cartoons, men have been cowed into believing that they're worthless or toxic, or that the whole purpose of life is just to pursue pleasure, to go to the bar and drink with your bros, and use and abuse women, to give up and pretty much give up on your responsibilities to society and family. So we're under attack, guys, and it's a specific plan by the devil. But it's not who we're called to be, right? God put us here now. I think it's kind of cool. He put us here now during everything that's going on to be the lights in the dark. One of my favorite scenes in The Return of the King is when they're coming back. It's right before the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. And they're coming back from Osgiliath because I think it was Faramir was holding the line there, and they had to retreat. And you see the dark riders flying, and they're being chased down. You could see the darkness following. But all of a sudden, you see Gandalf riding out on this white horse, and he puts out his staff, and this bright light shines out. You hear this really cool music, and the darkness kind of dissipates a little bit. That's us. It's a battle. It's something that it's going to take us down to the bones. It's going to take us down to everything, the bare minimum, everything that's deep inside. It's going to expose. But the cool thing is, if we're put here, that means God chose us to put here. Out of everyone else that He could, He put us here now, so that we can fight this battle. And I like to go with poetic imagery sometimes, and I've read a lot about different things, and sometimes this is kind of the way I like to view it to myself. It's a poetic battle. It's the battle for good and evil. We know who ultimately wins. We know what the result is, but we're in the process. So I've heard sometimes someone said that if you get to heaven, you're talking like, hey, what'd you do during the war on Earth during your life? What'd you do? Oh yeah, I did all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. You hear soldiers talking about it. I was in Iwo Jima. I was at all this, different battles. Well, this is our battle, and we're going to have the rest of eternity to remember what we did here and now. So it's kind of cool. We're just a few people. In Henry V, he talked about we few, we happy few. That's cool. That gets me excited that, God put us in these insurmountable odds. And this is when God shows off. He's like, you think this is terrible? I got this. You just rely on me and we're going to do it. We may be, in all of this stuff, we may be tempted to, it's tough. We want to sit down. We want to abandon our call as men, and forsake our families and our homes. But He saw fit to put us here in His providence. So that is enough. That's enough to bring about this ultimate victory of Jesus Christ. So let's take a minute just to look at ourselves as men. See how God designed us for this battle. So when you're thinking of authentic masculinity, what's probably one of the first things you think of? Anybody?
Actually, humility.
Humility, good. What?
Self-control.
Self-control. Yeah. Courage. Fortitude. Strength. Right? And those are all good things. I'm just going to focus on strength for a minute. It's one of the more notable aspects of masculinity. There's physical strength and there's moral strength, right? It is absolutely crucial, especially for young men, to develop both. Now, I'm not an exact specimen of this, but hey, I can lift some stuff. I'm just fat. But anyways, physical strength allows us to protect our families and our friends, or when there's always going to be war, some kind of war, because as long as there's evil on the earth, it's going to happen. We men need to build our bodies so that we're strong to the best of who we are. But without moral strength, that makes us dangerous. Because a very strong man who's physically strong has no control over himself without that moral strength. And then he's actually dangerous to people around him. But a man who has a lot of moral strength and who has solid convictions, but maybe he doesn't have that physical strength, then he's not actually able to defend anything when called. Now, I know there's not a lot of straight up battles and fights going on around, but as men, that's one of our defining things, strength. And building our bodies, and not so that we can, you see these dudes on Facebook and it's like, follow my program and you can have my abs, that's not the point. We build our bodily strength so we can be useful. That's what it's for, to be useful. How are we useful in our bodily strength as men? Obviously, men have more upper body strength and more physical strength than women. Sorry, that's a fact.
It's not going to apologize to anyone here.
Right. But what do we use our strength for? Physically, to be useful. How do we do it? What?
Carrying all the groceries in one trip.
There you go, carrying in all the groceries. Yeah, I got this.
While also opening the door with your foot.
There you go, yeah.
Every folding chair in the room at once.
See, but we use our strength.
Fighting.
Look at civilization. It was built by men, for the most part. The physical structures, the trenches that were dug, the wires that were laid down, the sewers. That was all, it was built by men. Now, civilization was civilized by women, but that's another conversation. So our strength is for protection, also to protect our families. And I mentioned this last week. Who do we protect? Our wives, our families, our children, communities, our countries, right? We use our bodies and our physical strength to protect those whom we love. And we're supposed to protect women. Do you remember what the first thing we protect women from is, what I mentioned last week? Yeah. Ourselves. Our own weaknesses, our own fallen nature, our own disordered desires. If we can't defend our family from our temper or from our vices or anything else, then we are going to damage them in a lot of ways. If we're to love our wives, and many of you probably get married, maybe a couple of you be priests, that's great. If you're going to love your wife as Christ loved the church sacrificially, you got to consider yourselves to be in training right now. Because the qualities and character that you need as a husband and a father don't just appear when you get married and start having kids. Now's the time when you're in boot camp. It's such an exciting time right now for you. You're right on the cusp of starting your life. You're in college, or you're about to go into college, and all this stuff is happening, and it's really exciting to be on the edge of this, and what's my life going to be? But you also need to be practicing to be the kind of man you want to be in your vocation. Because even if you're a priest, you still need certain characteristics and qualities, right? So, if you're not working on that now to become the man that you need to be later, then it's going to be that much harder when you're required to be something that you haven't been practicing to be. Trust me, I know this. One of today's trends is that adolescence extends further and further into adulthood. You know, we see it in these party schools where it's like, if anyone ever saw Pinocchio, it's Pleasure Island. You know, Jordan Peterson talks about that in a couple of his talks. He's got some great stuff about people just wanting to party and have fun. But adulthood, and by extension manhood, it's not something that happens to us externally. It's something, growing up is something that we choose, that we have to leave behind our childish ways, and I think that's scriptural in some way or another. But we have to choose to take the responsibility of being an adult. And becoming a functional adult goes beyond just being, you know, a sexually mature male. There's a lot of those out there, but very few men. It's something where we choose to accept the responsibility that's given to us. And when we become a husband and a father or a priest, we accept our station in life and then fulfill those obligations. So how do you do that now? You got to find an older guy, and it's great to have your friends to build you up, but in some ways, it's like the blind leading the blind. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean, like, you got to talk to an older guy who has experience and who's been there and done that and can help guide you, inform you. So those mentors, and then your friends also have a huge impact, because if you surround yourself with people who are going to drag you down, that's not worth it, you know? So, yeah, you basically become like the people you hang out with. So I'm going to turn it over to Ethan, because he's got some cool stuff too.
Great. So as Chris was saying, this is kind of a formative time in our lives as young men, right? You're going from high school into college, or in college, you're learning things, you're forming the habits that are going to be, you know, with you through, you know, the next foreseeable part of your lives. And I think if you remember, Chris just said it now, I'll remind you again, I said your environment and your friends, you know, form who you are. I think it was Dr. Whitmore, correctly, when he came and talked to you guys about virtue, right? That, I think he said it then, and if not, I'll connect it directly for you right now. Your environment determines how you build virtue. Okay? So your virtue, as he was saying, is a habitual choosing of the good, right? That is how you build virtue, little bit by little bit, small act upon small act, and it builds over time. If you're in an environment that is conducive to that, then you're going to have these nice, firm foundations for, you know, the tower of your virtue, if you will, right? You know, if you don't, then you're going to be building on shoddy ground, sandy ground. That's in the scripture, right? You know, you build on firm foundation, you're going to have a great solid house. If you don't, you know, sand's going to slip out, it's all going to cave down. So, what do we need to do as men to be these solid, these bearers of civilization that Chris is just describing to us, right? So I think a couple of things I picked out was we need to have discipline, we need to have courage, we need to be sacrificial, and we need to be prayerful. Okay, so we need to be disciplined, right? So discipline is linked with that habit that we were just talking about before. If you don't have discipline, you can't build a habit, right? If you just decide, you know, I'm going to do whatever I want today. I'm not going to have a plan. I'm not going to have any goals. I'm not going to decide upon a set thing. I'm just going to see what kind of comes out and see what goes with. That's the complete antithesis of discipline. And you're never going to grow into anything intentionally that way. So discipline, building a good, solid foundation, building a habit, right? One of the first things that they do at the seminary, one of the things they first do in the military, one of the things that they a little less forcefully do, but you have to do it in college, as you guys know, is find a schedule, right? You have certain things that you have to do during the day, certain responsibilities that you have to meet. And this, if you lay this out well, if you take the time to organize yourself, this will build your habit of discipline. And your discipline will come in to be very, very important, again, in a couple of minutes. So we'll put discipline on the side for a second. We have to be courageous, right? As we're going into these new environments, we're going to the military, we're going to college, we're going out into the workforce, whatever we're doing, right? We are going to meet people from literally every background and every walk of life. That is one of the most awesome things about the United States of America. We have the ability to have contact with almost every single culture in the world just by like walking down the street in Northern Virginia somewhere. Like, it's awesome. It's really, really cool. However, that means that we're going to have our beliefs, our kind of ingrained assumptions, our cultures, the culture we grew up in is going to be challenged a little bit, and not necessarily in a bad way. But we are going to have to be courageous because we have to stand up for the things that we know are right. We have to stand up for ourselves and the way of life that we've decided to build for ourselves, right? And here's the other part too, is not only do we have to stand up for what we already know is good and all this stuff, that's more easy, right? What if we're wrong? What if these other people are shining lights on the way that we've done something poorly, or the gaps that we've left? You know, maybe we did a good job with our schedule, we did a good job with our learning and our education, but there's one area we missed because we're human. And now that is thrown into sharp relief, right? Can we be courageous enough to admit where we failed, where our discipline may not have been good enough, where our willpower, our strength failed us? You know, this is the kind of courage that we need as much as the kind to take up the sword and go to battle for that thing we know is good. And we also have to have the courage, and then back to the discipline, to see that thing for what it is and correct it within ourselves, right? That is one of the most important things that we can do. And I think it's one of the things that almost no men today are really willing to do in the wider culture of masculinity, right? We have to be right. We have to be on top of everything. It has to be the way we plan it to be. Like, oh no, I meant to do that, you know? We have to be willing to look at ourselves and be open to our own failures. The next thing, I think, is to be sacrificial, right? And all of these things that Chris was laying out, all these ways that men have devoted themselves to society, to building up our cultures, are in a way sacrificial. They're in service to one's family or to others, the community at large, right? You know, we're thinking, you know, thousands of years ago when they were building these first aqueducts in Greece and Egypt, the irrigation systems, right? Like, yeah, that benefits me directly if I'm building them because, yay, I get food and I get water, right? But it's also benefiting the society as a whole. You know, you working in this way is bringing this to other people, right? But it's also something you can't do on your own. So one person being sacrificial, like, we'll go a good distance, but it's not going to be able to benefit the wider community unless you have a group of men together being sacrificial and being united in that. That is how we truly change what is around us, because we owe dedication to our community and to our families and to our God. And that's the reverse order, right? God, family, and community. Okay? So, sacrificial, right? We as men, if we become priests, we are giving up, in a certain sense, you know, that relationship, that natural family, right, to serve a greater community as a spiritual leader, a spiritual father, right? If we're called to be a natural father, you know, we are called to, in a certain way, put aside some of that greater community, put aside certain things of the world in order to serve our wife and our children in the way that they need to be, right? You know, we can't be going out all the time and partying because we have to be an example to our kids, right? We have to teach them how to be good, strong men and women. We have a responsibility to our wives, right? To be there for them, to help them, you know, put together a strong home. You know, to be there to support them when their strength may run out, and to be available to have a relationship with them so that when our strength fails, we have someone who we can lean on in turn. We have all of this responsibility to the family, and by necessity, there's a certain amount of shunning of the world, just as with the priesthood, that you have to do to be able to achieve these things. You can't have it all. This is one thing, you know, like I'm going to talk to the girls about this certainly either. Like, you know, you can't always be a mom and have like this, you know, executive career. It's a choice you have to make. It's the same thing with being a dad. Like, you know, you have to provide, but you can't be that workaholic guy who never comes home and never sees his kids. There's a nice fine line of where you're having all your responsibilities kind of line up, which is again where that discipline comes in, right? So discipline is not like the main thing in all of this, but it's an undercurrent that will serve you. If you're trying to do all these things and you don't have discipline, then we're going to fall apart, right? And the last thing is going to be prayer, right? We have to have like an actual, real, authentic interior life. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do this. being men of virtue is hard, especially in, you know, the world around us. Everything out there is trying to tell us that the exact opposite of what we're called to do is the thing that we should be doing. You know, we can't overcome that. We can't overcome these sins because, like, every single one of us has areas that we struggle with, right? Some people it's lust, some people it's pride, some people it's, you know, power, some it's gluttony, like whatever the thing is, there's something out there in the world that's calling you towards that thing. And we can't resist that. We can't, ultimately. In some way or another, we're ultimately going to slide into that because we're of our fallen human nature. Our wills do not have mastery over our bodies the way they used to before the sin of Adam and Eve. Right? That's just not how it works anymore. So we really need this prayer to ask God to bolster our strength when it fails, to help us to truly desire the things that we're working for, and to aid us in that respect. So I just want to point out, we'll switch back over here in just a second, maybe get some questions in, but the word virtue, right, comes from a Latin, cognate, means virtue as well. But that Latin word, like virtuum or something like that, I think it was, is based on another Latin word, vir, which is man. So in these ancient societies, when Latin and Greek and all these other languages were being spoken thousands of years ago, they automatically identified these virtues with being a man. It's like, if you're a man, you will have these things. And if you're not worthy of the name. Like, literally, man is in the definition of virtue, as we understand it. So, I think we'll maybe go from there.
Yeah, we'll take a couple questions in just a sec. There's a whole lot more I want to say on all of this stuff.
Yes.
Half an hour is not enough time, but I just want to throw out there, nothing will destroy you as a man. Well, I don't want to say nothing, but one of the most powerful things that is destroying men, their families, their children, their wives right now is pornography. It's like an elephant in the room, but millions and millions and millions of men in the Christian Catholic community and women are addicted. And it's right there. And when I say it'll render you impotent in so many, spiritually, physically. So I want to leave time for questions, but I had to include that because if you know someone or are struggling with that, there's ways to reclaim ourselves as men and our sexuality as men to something that is good and wholesome, so that we can see women, for the beautiful people that they are, and not just as a collection of body parts to be lusted after. So, there's a whole lot more, but let's open it up to questions.
Real quick, let me add just the tail end of that. I'm not going to say don't be ashamed of pornography addiction, because it is an objectively bad thing that we should feel guilty about, but not shameful. Like, guilt, yes; shame, no. Mm-hmm. Just get the help. Like, that's the thing. Like, most people at some point, at some level, struggle with this. Like, there are lots of guys, like not to scandalize you, but lots of guys who come to the seminary with problems like this, and they have to have that taken care of. Like, you can't be a good priest, struggling with that kind of problem. So you can't really, be like the fullness, like the full father that you could be, struggling with that as well. So it's not don't worry about it. Just if you know somebody, encourage somebody to get help. If you need the help, go get help. No shame. So yeah, questions. Sorry.
I was wondering, I feel like a lot of us here are we're all very young, obviously. I think most of us are single. And I think because of that, or because we're so young, we have a lot of energy and capacity and so much freedom that it's really easy, stay up late or party or just do all these things. It's really easy to just kind of get away with that, especially in the easy society we live in. So I was wondering if either of you, what advice you'd have for as young men who have so much freedom, so much energy, how can we take on responsibility now to kind of help us for the future? Because it's really easy right now to just not. So I was wondering if you had any concrete ideas or things for helping with discipline or taking on responsibility right now that would help us for whatever our future vocation is.
Well, first of all, it's a great observation. So a good way to point that out. I think, at least in my opinion, you can you can find a way to like have your partying be disciplined. I think that's the way to do it. Like you can find a way to make these activities into some sort of structure while still doing them. So you can kind of have this like kind of time for fun, for fraternity, you know, go out with, you know, when the girls, if you know, you meet somebody who's nice, like, you know, you can do all this stuff, but you have to just, you know, again, have the kind of the foresight, I guess, to schedule it in or to account for it ahead of time, right? So like what I tend to do, and it's way easier at the seminary because they kind of don't let you get away with not doing this, but like during the week, I have a really tight schedule, right? I go to bed at a certain time every single night, and I have, you know, windows for my homework and like working out and all this other stuff. But on the weekend, I say like, okay, I can go out to eat like 2 times. I will have no more than 3 12-ounce sodas over the course of the weekend. I'm going to, you know, make my holy hour at this time on Saturday because there's not a defined one set by the seminary. I have this paper I have to work on at this time. So basically, if you see where I'm going with this, is like structure your stuff that you have to do and then say, okay, I'm gonna party. It's this thing from like, you know, 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m., right? I'm gonna leave at midnight. And like set yourself that boundary. Right, so even though you're going, you're having a good time, you can get up a little bit late on Sunday because, you know, your schedule allows you to. You can go to a little later mass or something. Set the boundaries for yourself and then follow through. Even if it's like, again, like small steps first, right? You don't want to, you can't go, Chris will like this, I'm gonna use the example, but you can't go from just like no schedule to like being a Marine gunnery sergeant in like a minute. You can't. That takes a lot of training and years and effort. So that would be my kind of thought is, you know, decide what's important, what's critical, see what time you have left over for fun stuff, and then set your limits on what you can afford to do, and then do those things. But make sure you stick to your decision.
I was going to say incrementalism too, but yeah, absolutely.
Now, I never do this, but there was a piece of advice for building discipline that I heard. It was, I think it was like an admiral in the Navy or something. He was
Make your
retired.
bed every day. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, that one, yeah, where he said to make your bed every day because it builds discipline, because it's something that you do every day. Like I said, I never do this, so I get a little hypocritical for talking about this.
Plus, if you don't do anything, you
but-
actually say you can accomplish something.
Yeah,
That's
and it starts the day off on a positive note, and if you have a terrible day, you have to make that to return to.
Yeah, that was a great speech.
I've seen that one too.
Yeah,
Get a hobby. That's what I've done.
yeah, we're close.
Because
We
I just
got
want to
like
say this, like, I
30
don't go to
seconds.
like a small school, like I don't go to Christendom. I go to a pretty big school. We can have classes anywhere from, you know, 6 a.m. on some days to like, and I bet Christian has some of those too, but like, there's way more, I think, just a lot more student people around. Find a hobby. Find like, you know, something, or a small group of people. Like me and my roommates, we play golf. And that gets us, you know, away from like partying scenes and stuff. 4 hours out of our day, we're outside, we're in nature, and we just relax. And it kind of cleans your mind. And, you know, maybe your hobby's like, I don't know, you like to go box, like I like to go boxing. And, you know, that also works for me for some. Find hobbies. Like, when you have so much free time, try to fill it with things that are worthwhile instead of just like staring at the TV for 7 hours and doing nothing. Like, try to build a skill. Right? It's totally worth it. And it makes your, and it gives you something to look forward to. And you can build goals off of that. And it kind of do, you guys are saying having goals and having structure. Get a hobby. Find something you enjoy and stick with it.
Physical outlets, especially, I remember
Oh,
being
yeah,
an
fighting.
18-year-old guy,
Fighting's fun.
like, you know, you have so much energy, like you want to do everything, like finding those physical outlets to just wear out your body is like the best way to do it. But we're actually going to have to switch now, so we will have follow-up.
Already been 30
Yeah.
minutes.
If you guys have questions, come find me or Chris a little bit later.
Yeah, we'd love to
We
keep
can talk
talking.
offline.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
So,
yeah, we can do
Mine,
that.
mine wasn't really a question, it was just a piece of advice I had. So.
okay.